This September 26th meeting of the Cincinnati Preschool Promise Board of Directors. I'm pleased to see that our strategy in having an evening meeting is working, so it's good to see members of the public there. Just as a point of order, if you will, for those of you who may not have been here before, our process is to welcome comments from the public early on in the agenda. We'll be getting to that in about 10 minutes time or so after a couple of routine bits of business. But if you want to speak, you need to fill out a little form. Those are outside the door, and somebody will help you do that so that we know who you are and can introduce you and where you're from and so on. And you also have, is it 2 minutes, am I right on that, to speak? And we'll monitor that as well so that we can keep things moving along. And also, for those of you who are here from the public, there's coffee and water and such over there for you to help yourself to, so do feel free for that. So we'll begin with a roll call. Steve Shipman isn't here, Tim Fogarty isn't here, Jasmine Jones isn't here yet. We're expecting her though. So Cheryl Rose. Yep. Terry England. Here. Laura San-Magret. Kimya Moyo. John Pepper. Here. And it's Tate here. Mike Graham, yes I am. Odell Owens. There you are. I thought your mouth was full and you weren't going to speak. Sally Westheimer. Toylan O'Neill. Here. And then Micah Cameras we're also expecting. And Debbie also, I'm sorry, Creole was very good and cleaned up her name tag, and so I forgot to call it, but Debbie also is not able to be with us this evening, owing to a travel schedule. The next item on the agenda is an approval of the agenda. The agenda to which I'll refer is the one that was placed at your seats, board members, not the one that was in the pre-read. There's some minor differences between the two, reordering of topics and the like. So there is one item I'd like to add to the agenda with your permission. Several days ago, Jen Wagner from CPS reached out and asked if it would be possible for this Cincinnati Preschool Promise to endorse, I guess it's issue 24, do I have the number right? I saw it on a badge back there.
Issue 24.
Yes, thank you very much. The upcoming Cincinnati School Board levy. And she sent me some information on that. Perhaps she'll be here a little bit later. She will not be here.
She sent her apologies. She's just really sick tonight.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I got some information on that later. So I would like to add that to the agenda after the mission moment, if I might, a discussion on that, and we can talk about that and decide how we want to proceed. So with that addition, I'd like to have a motion. Well, first of all, does anyone else on the board have additional rearrangements or other topics to introduce into the agenda? Hearing none, then I call for an approval of the agenda with that one change that I just suggested. So moved. Thank you very much. We'll let the minutes show that a motion made for Minutes Tate, seconded by Sally Westheimer, that the agenda itself is approved. Which brings us to the review and approval of the minutes. Those were in your pre-read, another packet, or another version. Yeah, the print looks different, and the paper is a little bit better than what we print on in my office. But other than that, it's exactly identical. So, oh, you did? All right. So are there changes that you want to call to our attention?
Vanessa, do you want to highlight changes in the minutes?
It was noted that there was under the special education presentation, we added Dr. Jameson's first name on the, there was a reference in the interim executive director's update that it said diverse candidates, and it was meant to say extensive. It was an extensive list. If we weren't saying diversity in terms of inclusion or anything like that, but an extensive work. So that's under the interim director's report.
And then the public comments, the comments from Gwen Robinson.
Yes, and Gwen Robinson's public comment report, her emphasis was not on process and procedures, but it was on sensitivity and friendliness of our letters, denial letters.
But these are issues that Debbie also brought up.
Yes,
She's
exactly.
concerned about.
That's correct.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Vanessa. So with those changes, may I have an approval for the minutes, please?
So moved.
And a second on that? Is there any further discussion? So all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
So the minutes recorded that a motion made by Odello and seconded by John Pepper, the minutes from the last meeting were approved. That brings us to our opportunity for public comments. I'd like to welcome Craig Rosen from CPS. Craig, if you'd use the podium over there, please, and that's so that we can capture you on video for archiving and for beaming out. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Craig Rosen. I don't know if I'm from CPS, but a supporter of Cincinnati Public Schools. I am here to reaffirm Treasurer Wagner's request that your board support issue 24, which is the renewal levy for Cincinnati Public Schools. It's roughly $51.5 million, which represents 10% of the operating budget. It won't raise your taxes, and we'd like to continue doing the wonderful things that we expect of our school district, such as continuing with Mine Tomorrow, expanding our school choice, having viable programs not only in our schools but in our neighborhood. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those at your next agenda item. Thank you.
Craig, you just saved me most of the commentary that I was going to have to deliver in a few moments, so thank you very much for that. Has anyone else turned in other forms at this point for public comment? Just the one? All right, thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda then is the mission moment. This is going to be in two parts. An email came in recently that kind of worked its way up the food chain, I suppose, you know, from the provider to some of the quality improvement people, or to Stephanie, finally to me. And we thought that this was a really good reminder of why it is we do the work we do. And so I'd like to begin just by reading the great bulk of this email. My husband and I were really looking forward to the preschool promise. We have what's considered a larger family nowadays, 4 kids ages 12 to 3. We both work and both feel we make a difference for our city, our kids, and our community. We definitely enjoy the livelihood and security that working for the city provides. However, we pretty much live paycheck to paycheck. Almost my entire income has gone to tuition for preschool for many years. So needless to say, we were a little bit disappointed when we learned that we were originally rejected for a preschool promise due to our child's age. As disappointing as it was, we completely understood the priority going to children who would be entering kindergarten the next school year. It was a small blow, but not really, because we value the importance of hard work and nurturing environment provided by the caregivers and staff at our preschool. It just meant we'd have to scrape by a little bit longer. When we received the approval letter for preschool promise last week, I was in a little bit of denial. I misinterpreted the way the letter read and thought that the monthly disbursement stated was the total assistance amount for the year. I immediately began to calculate how much would be deducted each week and compute how that would work out for our budget. I excitedly shared the awesome news with my husband and family. Someone suggested that I was reading the letter wrong. So I emailed the representative to clarify, in my mind the whole time thinking there's no way the entire tuition would be covered. Maybe you can imagine the feelings that rushed through my head when I almost immediately received an actual phone call from Levada Bell to verify that my child's entire tuition would be covered through May 2018. Tears is big letters of relief, joy, appreciation, and more. She was very professional, extremely kind, and also compassionate while I blubbered with uncontrollable emotion. This is going to change our lives. We're going to be able to pay all our bills now on time. No more groceries on credit cards. We'll be able to make substantial efforts towards paying down debt. We can now realistically plan to make much needed repairs on our home. Thanks and deep appreciation doesn't seem to cover it for all the folks who work so hard to pass this initiative and make a difference for hardworking families who want to make the best choices for their children. So it's nice to know that there's that kind of sentiment out there in the public, and we know that there's lots more besides. So, you doing okay, Cheryl?
That was me at one point. That's powerful. That's powerful.
Thank you, thank you.
You should say that, because in 5 minutes, we're gonna need testimony.
Oh, that, absolutely, right. So that, for the archives.
All right.
There we go. What we'd also like to do is, the now filled out team. It's just so nice to be able to say that. So, for our second part of the mission moment, what we'd like to do is feature one of the providers who's been approved to participate in the Quality Improvement Program. Tiffany Reese, I have not had a chance to meet you yet, but I think I'm about to. So, Tiffany, welcome, and thank you very much. Patty Craig's gonna.
Tiffany, we're good, we don't need microphones. I'm going to introduce you to Tiffany Reeses, and she is an administrator at J.C. Wynn Child Development Center in Walnut Hills. She also brought her family with her today. So,
Welcome, good to have you here. You should be very proud of
she's
your
a mom, an educator, and now a new administrator for a program that's pursuing Step Up to Quality. And so we were really excited to meet her. She was actually one of our first quality improvement applications that came through. We did an initial visit, and she looked like every other administrator I know who was shuffling and doing about 4 things at the same time.
It is for public, okay, thank you. So I wanted to give her a minute to tell you a little bit about her experiences with just a few weeks that she's been in the program so far. So let me turn it over to Tiffany.
I'm nervous and excited sometimes. Okay, so like she said, my name is Tiffany Reeses, and I'm currently the director at J.C. Wynn Development Center. I'm fairly new to this. I have been a teacher or a teacher's aide or a lead teacher for maybe like 12 years. So I never thought that I would be in a position where I can lead others. I always knew that I wanted to do something with children. I just didn't know what direction to take. So my vision when I was younger was lining up stuffed animals and my brothers and sisters and teaching them. That's probably why I didn't like school down, but that's how I started. And my grandma used to always tell me like the best way to get things done is to simply begin. So I'm like, okay, preschool promise is a beginning for me because I need some type of coaching, I need help. You know, and then especially with me coming out as a lead teacher into the administration role within 2 weeks, it was like I was overwhelmed. I started working for J.C. Wynn in July. I got promoted in August. So I was kind of overwhelmed, but they saw something in me that apparently I didn't see in myself. So I'm like, I need some help. So when Preschool Promise came about, I was ecstatic. And I'm nervous, and I'm just happy that I have other support in the community. So when she introduced it, I'm like, do I really want to get into this program? Is this like someone going to be watching? Am I every move? What exactly is the program? So when she introduced me to the program, it was basically, she was explaining to me everything they had to offer. And I'm like, okay, everybody always said what they have to offer, but what do you guys really have to offer? So when she came, she basically started off giving me, not acknowledgements, but she was saying how impressed she was. And I'm like, impressed? What do you mean? I'm here 2 weeks. And she's like, well, your lesson plans are great. You know, you guys are really in the right direction. She said, but what Preschool Promise can do is help you on building your lesson plans and help you, because I also go before in front of a board of committee. So I make the decisions, but I don't make the final decisions. So she was telling me how different ways that I can approach them. And I'm like, okay, this probably will work. Okay, I'm excited. And then she introduced me to options for CDA. Because like I said, I was a mother. My children was my main focus. So every school they attended, I taught. Every daycare they went to, I went to. And work. So when she said that they had a CDA, funding for a CDA, I'm like, okay, she only starts in 2 weeks, so would you like to participate? I'm like, yeah. So we started, me and another preschool teacher started preschool, we started the CDA at Cincinnati State last Saturday, and we love it. I'm so happy that they told me that it was funded, because that was one of the big issues, was another deal. I already have 4 children, I already have a house, no, I just can't afford it, so I was excited about that. I actually brought my staff with me. We are all about support, so I'm real big on support, and I feel like Preschool Promise is a real big support on me. And if they teach me, I can teach my staff. So this, I'm so nervous. I'm sorry. It's just a blessing to be here again.
We're grateful you're here.
Thank you.
Right, I'm just so I'm happy. I'm excited about this journey in my life, and I'm glad Preschool Promises they're a great program. So thank you.
Good. Wait a minute, Tiffany, wait a minute. Tiffany, I have a question for you. So why do you have such passion around helping children?
I don't know. I think someone helped me when I was younger, so I always wanted to do that. Like I'm a foster mother also, so you would never tell the difference. I don't know. I always had a real passion about it. I'm so emotional about it. That's probably why I'm like, did I just cry in public? But I always had a passion for children. I always wanted to do something with kids. I just didn't know what to do, or how to start, or what resources was out there. I always had some type of teacher, guidance, mother, nurturing in me. So it was just a calling. And as y'all can see, I'm already passionate.
Well, it's really clear
so
you've been.
emotional.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm done.
Oh, okay. So it's really clear that you bring not only this passion to this work and love, ultimately, right? You know, but that you've also been on a journey, and this is helping you take your next step in the journey,
Right.
which is going to help you then serve more people.
Right. It made me kind of come out of the box, out of my comfort zone. Made me believe more in myself.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, let's hear it again for Tiffany. Good, thank you. What I'd like to do now is shift to a discussion of the issue I added to the agenda, namely a discussion about this board's endorsement of the upcoming CPS levy in November. As Mr. Rosen said, summarized much of it, it's for about $51.5 million. It was, as I understand it, passed initially in about 2008 and was renewed in 2012. This will be then its second renewal. The money is earmarked by and large, as I understand it as well, for academic improvement, technology in the classroom, that sort of thing. The all-important line is it will not raise your taxes, right? So we always want to make that clear. So when Jen reached out to me, I thought it was important for us to have a conversation about it. I had in the back of my mind the stronger emerging relationship between this board and CPS on a specific concrete working level. And it struck me that this is a very reasonable thing to ask of us. But I also didn't want to speak on your behalf without your opportunity for weighing in. So I'll be quiet now, and I'm just curious as to what thoughts that you may have.
Well, I guess I could speak. I can't imagine any more important thing than to support the continuation of investing in education for our community.
Thank you, Cheryl. Others? Yes, Sally.
And even building on that, when we are wildly successful with having children prepared for school, if the schools aren't ready for them, it was a wasted effort. It has to be the partnership. It has to be.
Wise words, thank you. Others?
The classic no-brainer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, why are we talking about this?
All right. Then what we need is a motion.
Move it.
Okay, John Pepper moves it, Cheryl Rose seconds it, and all those in favor? Aye. Those dissenting, abstaining, forgot to ask those questions earlier. So let the record show that by unanimous voice vote on a motion made by John Pepper and seconded by Cheryl Rose, the Board of Directors of the Cincinnati Preschool Promise is pleased to be able to endorse the upcoming CPS levy. So there you go. How's that? So we have a bunch of kind of interior work to do, if you will. As you know, those of you who've been around the board table for the last number of months, there's been a lot of heavy lifting in terms of our own internal processes and procedures. And so this is the first of our annual meetings where we'll conduct a number of regular pieces of business. The material that you're going to need is really back in your packet of materials. There's a sheet, for example, that has the preschool promise board of managers and terms. Following that is a committee roster and the like. And so so do we have to, oh, it includes toilet, though, doesn't it? Sure, yes. So there's a way in which what we could do is, unless there's a reason for us going bullet by bullet, if we kind of approve page 1, we've hit 2 board members, or two bullets at the same time, right? The members and the terms. Does that sound like a good way to proceed? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion, please, to approve the Cincinnati Preschool Promise Board of Managers list and the terms associated with them, noting that the terms expiring on August 31st of the designated year. So may I have a motion for that, please?
So moved.
Thank you very much,
Second.
Pastor Tate. And who was that? Terry? Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on this? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed or abstaining? So let the minutes show that the Board of Managers and their associated terms was approved by unanimous voice vote on a motion made by Pastor Ernest Tate and seconded by Cheryl Rose. That brings us to the committee list.
Terry England.
Oh, I'm sorry, Terry England. Oh, my bad. I was looking over in that direction. So, that brings us to the next, which is the committee list. So this was circulated earlier, and thank you, all of you, by the way, who were contacted, who agreed to serve on these committees for your service. One of the things that I would note is that this represents an expansion then, which we've been looking forward to, of the executive committee. We were very careful to make sure that each of the nominating organizations is equally represented on the committee. And so your first meeting, by the way, will be next Tuesday. So I hope you'll be ready to go, those of you who are new to it.
She said we have 2 weeks' notice.
Oh.
That's what she teaches.
Oh, okay. All right, well,
Next Tuesday, what time?
well, I don't want to say now. I don't know. I think I'm in trouble. So, at any rate, so it's good to have the executive committee fleshed out. I'd also, the Finance and Audit Committee, of course, has been up and running for some time now. And so we thank Pastor Tate for his good work on that. The Governance Committee and the Community Engagement Committee are the 2 brand new committees, and we'll have a great deal of work to do instantaneously. So you may remember, as we went through the governance documents initially, there was all kinds of things that were specified that we needed to be doing, like board evaluations and all that sort of stuff. And so now the governance committee is going to have to operationalize that document and figure out what it is we need to do and when we need to do it. So those of you on that committee will have your hands full, to be sure. So what I'd like to do is ask for a motion to approve the standing committee membership, please.
So moved.
Pastor Tate, you're on a roll. How about Terry? Let's let you do it again.
Second.
There you go. All right, so this time I'll get it right. So all those in favor of the standing committees, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstaining? Thank you. So on a motion duly made by Pastor Tate, seconded by Terry England. The list of standing committee membership was unanimously approved, which I suppose we should also note the officers, right? Call that out.
Right, yes.
Right, so the officers are noted on that same page. Myself as chair, Pastor Tate as the, oh, yes, that was on the previous page, wasn't it? So, thank you. So, myself as chair, Pastor Tate as treasurer, and Debbie Alsop as secretary for the terms specified there. So I think it'd be good insofar as to elect the officers on its own motion. So if I could have a motion to do that, please. Oh, John, I thought it was Pastor Tate again. Sorry. Okay, thank you. And a second for Sally. So all those in favor?
Aye.
So those abstaining or no vote? Thank you. So on a motion made by John Pepper, seconded by Sally Westheimer, the three officers were approved by unanimous voice vote with the terms indicated. That brings us to what? Okay, sure, yeah. Why don't you do the disclosure statement?
The last item under the annual meeting, we issued the conflict of interest and disclosure statements at the August 14th meeting with one reminder to have those turned in. There is an additional copy of the materials. If you don't have that, we can get that in as soon as possible so that we are in compliance with the newly adopted governance principles. And there is also a copy of the governance principles that were adopted last month in the materials as well.
Good,
And you
thank
can
you.
return those to me. Thank you.
Stephanie?
Yes.
I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember whether I turned it in or not. Could you, oh, I did, I mean, did some and they don't, maybe others remember.
We have now.
But you just told me I didn't. Okay, I'll turn it in.
Who are they?
Are you gonna be-
I'm just going to fill mine out and send it in. If I've done it twice, I've done it twice. Right?
And one did, but has to fill it out again, because I think Dr. Owens filled it out earlier on when we gave you a form that was found and corrected.
So that brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is observer comments. And so we have several of the observers here present. You're filling in, I take it, for Jen Wagner tonight, sorta?
Sorta, yes.
Right? Because there's two designated
Correct.
from each agency, so.
But I'll be here for Jen tonight.
Oh, okay, thank
And
you.
are you gonna be the secondary also, Sheriff, going forward, or primary, however you all decide?
Correct.
Just let me know, but it'll be you and Jen going forward.
Fine, so this is, if you have any questions, comments, things that you'd like to observe, you or Alicia.
I mean, the only comment I would make is I really enjoy the mission moments because I think that really brings home the real reason that we were all in this to begin with. So I enjoyed that this evening, and it's just really a pleasure to be here, and then I'll be here moving forward.
Good, well, welcome. We'll look forward to seeing you from month to month. I'll turn things over now to Pastor Tate to get into some committee reports.
Thank you, sir. We want to just kind of give an account of work that we've done with our financial working group, which is now our Finance and Audit Committee. First thing we've done is we have, a few weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, we submitted a process to our executive committee on going through a process of selecting an auditor for the upcoming audit that is required of the funds that we have to give an account for. And so what we've done is we've implemented a process that allowed us to take consideration, take the required list of potential candidates as companies who do the audit. We submitted or we released a request for proposal to those respective businesses. We received 8 in response to our request. of the 8 criteria was set that they had to be a firm that had at least 40 or more accountants on staff, because we knew, 20, sorry, on staff, so that we knew that they would be able to accommodate the timeline that we had put in place. And to have a number of accountants on staff means that they could probably do the job without straining their staff and putting pressure on our staff. Once that process was completed, the review process, reviewing all of the proposals in, there were questions that were asked of the firms that responded. Those questions were answered by our staff and members of our board. Once that process was completed, then we went through the second phase of the process. By that time, our esteemed finance manager was on board, and he has now taken the process to the next level. With his expertise, we trusted that he understood what needed to happen. He moved in quickly, understood the process from Jill Johnson, who is was acting as our representative from our trust entity, who is the CFO of United Way, along with the controller from United Way, Don Johnson? Reynolds, everybody's got a last name, Don Reynolds. And together they came together along with myself, Stephanie, and Vanessa, and we walked through the review of the application or the responses, turned it over to Hector, and he followed through with the first and second interviews as it relates to those individuals. Came to the financial working group with a recommendation. Upon his recommendation, the financial working group accepted the recommendation and approved it, with the authority that was given to us by the executive committee to follow through with the process. Because of the timeline, we wanted to make sure that we stayed on point. And so you have a copy of the process in your handout on page number 5, so that everybody can be aware of how the process worked. And it's very well detailed on what happened and how we considered the company that we selected. And if you look at the end of the matrix, you'll see the company that was selected was Clark, Schaefer, and Hackett to conduct the audit for our January 1 through June the 30th expenditures for the Cincinnati Preschool process. I think that concludes my report on that piece.
Are there any questions for Pastor Jay from the board members? Okay, thank you very much for seeing to this, and I presume now, Hector, the auditors are on board.
They are. They started up Monday, so we've been replying to their requests and providing them the documents they require.
Great, wonderful, thank you so much.
And Father Graham, I don't know if I introduced Hector Blanco. He was not on our staff in our last board meeting, but I do want him to stand as our newly hired finance manager. And again, his credentials are astounding. His commitment to the job has been impressive. His passion for excellence is overwhelming sometimes, but I appreciate what he brings to the table, and he is truly committed to the Cincinnati Preschool promise. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Pastor.
I understand he's a product of the John Pepper headhunting agency.
He is.
There's a connection there.
For that, I'm very grateful.
We do also want to, Mr. Chairman, go over our financial report.
Please.
That is also included in our handout for this evening. What we've done in our finance audit and committee is ask that there is a reflection of all of the dollars that have been collected and reported on for the Preschool Promise as it relates to what's collected by Cincinnati Public Schools, then what's given to the trusted entity, United Way, and then what's given to the Preschool Promise. So the report you have will reflect 3 categories or 3 columns. One for Cincinnati Preschool Promise and its levy dollars. The other column is for CPS and its levy dollars. And finally, our trusted entity, United Way of Greater Cincinnati, and its part of the process for how the dollars are being handled. And then the end column will show the total preschool expansion levy dollars and how those dollars are being spent. It is what's been budgeted, and this is a reflection of what has happened between July 1 and August 31st. So you may see columns or line items where there are zeros. That's only because there has not been activity in those columns, or if there has, There have been invoices that are still not submitted for the work that has been done. And so once the invoices that have been submitted, they've been submitted to United Way. United Way then works with the Preschool Promise staff to get those invoices paid, and then you'll see that reflected in our report. So as we go forward, I just want to read some of the columns where you see the levy dollars, the budget was $7,837. As to date, or during this time period, those dollars had not been transferred to our trusted entity or to the Cincinnati Preschool Promise. There have been no contributions under either of the columns. If you move down, our expenses are starting to incur. We have tuition assistance budget for $2,238,823. We have quality improvement dollars of $472,472, and there are under the similar dollars or allocations under the Cincinnati Public School levy column for budget amounts as well. Again, for the only line item that you will see that's different from CPP is going to be quality improvement, cost of quality wages, as well as the special education support. Again, these are budgeted line items. There are some that will possibly need to be reviewed as we go along, but to this point, the budget is currently in place. If you look to your left, the CPP column, you'll see there are expenses starting to incur under the data and enrollment system evaluation. You see how much has been allocated, and we see how much has currently been spent during the time frame that we've mentioned above. Likewise, as you follow the columns, we've started to see transactions being done for advertising and for mailers. Down a little lower in our general column, we have our insurance, legal fees, office expenses, and so on. Over on the next page, I'm sorry. Again, you'll see more activity under the CPP levy column, where we have additional dollars that are now being spent for our internal staff and how much is budgeted for that. You'll see external staff and contracting for community engagement, how much was budgeted for that. And at this point, we've spent $9,500 for that, and that would bring our total expenses to $125,563 of the budgeted amount. You see across the board that there's one other column that is currently showing an expense, and that is our CPS administrative fee of $200,000. So our total expenses, $125,000. You move over to the column, you'll see that we are $989,186 budgeted. You'll see the variance minus $125,000 in the last column. That's my report.
Next question.
Odell?
On the CPS administrative fee, it's budgeted for $200,000.
Yes.
How is that paid?
How does it pay?
Is it quarterly, monthly? How would they get the $200,000?
In this case, it was taken off the top, but I will
Just take off the top.
in my knowledge, yes, sir.
We pay it all up front? And the question is why? The administrative fee for the whole year, why don't we break it up? So we can earn some of that interest.
I don't have an answer to that question. I'll check with Jen, and I'll be able to get back to you.
Question is, does it never come through our books, or they retain it and it never comes through our books?
I believe it's retained.
It's definitely retained,
Yeah.
but I don't know why they took it all at one time in the question. Now I'll find out the answer.
Is the, I don't understand the distinction between the CPP levy and the CPS levy.
There are dollars, the total dollars for the Preschool Promise, Cincinnati Preschool Promise is divided up between Cincinnati Preschool Promise and CPP. So the levy was for $15 million. And so you'll see the dollar amounts that are allocated under both of those entities.
So the CPS levy is what pays for the students who are doing CPS slots.
That's correct. And the amounts you see under CPP is what?
And this covers 12 months, period ending August 31. When did the period start?
This is from July 1 to August 31st. Because that's 2017, that's the new year, fiscal year. Yes, sir.
And again, the split of revenues in the end will depend on what parents choose, right?
Yes, sir.
In terms of slots.
Slots, yes, sir. And school, what the centers and or the schools.
Other questions for Pastor Tate? Thank you very much for that presentation. It's nice to see us spending some money on getting things done, you know, and we'll have more on that in a few moments when we start talking about students being enrolled and providers applying for quality assistance and the like. So do you have a policy that you want to share with us as well, Pastor?
Yes, sir. We have asked that we look at we've had our finance managers put together policies to govern how we currently function as Preschool Promise with our partner CPS and with the trusted entity as well. So Hector has presented two to our committee. I'm happy to stand and talk about the two that he submitted to our committee. We will, Mr. Hector. Yes, sir. Please.
Good evening, board members. I presented to the Finance and Audit Committee a recommendation that carryover funds, which are funds that were unspent in the previous fiscal year, but we have no policy on what to do with those funds. My proposal was that those funds be used in order to fund program-related expenditures in the current fiscal year, so that the carryover would carry over to the new year and only be available for use for program-related funding without further action by either the Finance and Audit Committee or by any committee, because we want to get the funds out to the people that we're trying to help. If the funds were going to be used for anything other than program-related funds, then a proposal would have to be submitted to the Finance and Audit Committee and then voted upon by the Finance and Audit Committee. The idea being that we should set some controls on ourselves in those funds, believing that the Finance and Audit Committee and this board would want us to spend on program-related. That's why it was set as a two-step item. Program-related, okay. Non-program related, you need permission.
Thank you. I would simply note that this is the first of a number of policies that will be coming from the Finance and Audit Committee as Hector finds, as it gets his legs. But we thought that this would be an important one to make sure that funds unexpended could be carried forward into this present fiscal year for the benefit of the work that we're doing. I thought I saw a hand, yes?
Yeah. When you say program, exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, so it's defining the policy as two items currently, which are tuition assistance and quality improvement. But it also makes space for workforce-related items like wage parity and the like. So it's defined in the policy currently as those two items, but leaves space for future items.
So if it gets carried over, it can fall into one of those 4 boxes. My sense is if it gets carried over, I want it for tuition. We don't have enough money to bring in a 3-year-old, so why would I do something else with that money? So who makes the decision which box it's going to go into?
So
it's carried over.
Yeah, it's carried over, and it gets divided then into one large box, which is program-related or non-program related.
I have a problem with that. It's too nebulous for me. You say program, you're saying workforce, you get 4 or 5 options. And I'm saying if it comes over, then we should vote as a board. As I said, for me, I want to see tuition because we don't have enough money to have a 3-year-old, so why would I want to do something else with money?
I understand that.
Show the public that we are good stewards of their money. We're going to put as many kids in the school as we can.
And I think what he's already said about ones is that the first bucket would be tuition assistance. or foster quality.
No, to me, I heard him say two. He said program and non-program.
He
He said he
said-
gave four within that bucket. I just don't want the money to come in, and then all of a sudden someone makes a decision to spend it on something else that's pending or behind, or we've overspent.
And that's why he said the process would be that if it comes in and we carry over, those first two buckets will be considered. Will be brought to the Financial Audit Committee. If we operate outside of those two, then the proposal needs to come to the board for approval. And the two I'm saying, the two I'm talking about are,
Still happy.
I just think you need to be very clear on which bucket it goes into, which one is a priority. You didn't say that which one was a priority. I think we should be very clear which one is a priority, and as a board, we should decide which priorities need to happen.
The challenge I see with making that decision right now is because we are just setting up this program, I think making sure that we have flexibility necessary to address, a year from now, things may look different and we may have a different need. So I guess my ask would be, obviously, we need a decision process so we can make those prioritizations at the time, but also leave it flexible enough so that should we need, for instance, if we don't have enough teachers or quality programs to put kids in, we can't get them in the program. So that might be our priority, if that makes sense, at the time.
As long as the board votes on that.
Yes.
I don't want to start a process now because you finish where you start. You put things into action, and then a year from now, people forget that they said, okay, and you give the money to the program, and it gets shifted over to something else without the board knowing what it was going to be. That's all I'm saying.
But if it pleases, it would get shifted to another program. So whether quality improvement or tuition assistance, both are programs. So it would remain within programs without, unless we got further definition.
I think an issue that I have is the use of the word program kind of necessarily clouds what it is we're referring to. And so I think we could be helped by saying that it will be used for tuition assistance and in a priority order. Tuition assistance, quality improvement, cost of quality, those three.
He said workforce.
Or
That was
that's cost
same
of
thing.
quality, same
Same
thing,
thing.
yeah. So, and that those three items in that prioritized order, what management has the authority to spend those funds that way. If they want to spend them in any other way than those, it requires approval by the Finance and Audit Committee. So I think the safeguard you're seeking is actually built in already, but I don't think there's the clarity with respect to what the targets are in their priority. Is that helpful, Woodrow?
Yes.
Sally?
I would add that the Finance and Audit Committee meets monthly and will be tracking where there's overspending and underspending and weighing in along the way. So that even though it says the staff are making decisions, they're not making them about those programs, those two programs, which I agree should be named, or the three programs. There will be an eye from the board on where it is on a monthly basis.
To build on that, maybe the policy should also say something about how the expenditure of funds carried over will always be reported to the board, full board at its next regularly scheduled meeting. Something like that, just so that it's always transparent to us.
Yeah.
Kenya?
So, at the end of the fiscal year, which is July, correct?
June 30th.
June 30th, so we're looking at the beginning of July. When these decisions will be made?
Presumably what would happen would be, well, maybe we wouldn't have any budget because we've done such a good job, but in the event that there were funds that we could carry over from the previous fiscal year to the new fiscal year, we would have a policy in place for their expenditure with a priority again on tuition assistance.
And that would occur then during that month?
Not that month, but that money would be available during the course of the upcoming fiscal year to be spent. So it wouldn't need to be spent all in that month.
And to Sally's point, we'll be watching all of the while where money, if there are variances, we're watching where those variances are. If we get to that point and we see that there's going to be a possible carryover, then yes, we're going to come to the board and try to figure out what to do with those funds.
So where did you put the carryover money for this year? If you're saying our fiscal year is July 1st.
Yes, sir.
You must have had some money from last year.
Yes, sir.
So where is that money housed right now?
At this point, it's not even reflected in the budget under a line item. So we needed to put the policy in place. And so what we'll do is, to Father Graham's point, we'll go back to make sure that we can account for any decision that hasn't been made.
Then if you don't have a policy, you should have a figure.
It was, $174,000.
John, did I see your hand up?
Yes. It's my understanding that we have a carryover of $7 million coming out of the first 6 months of the levy. I may be wrong, I remember. I was remembering we would have a carryover in July 1 of around $7 million. And there was an important question on the table as to whether we should reserve some or all of that as a reserve for 2 reasons. One being we don't have funding for the last 6 months of this levy, though we were planning well in advance of the levy ending, I know, and then the other would be a reserve for unknowns. And I hope the Finance Committee, Audit Committee is considering, this is a big block of money, if I'm right, that's being carried over right now, $7 million. And how that's going to be spent, reserve or not, how it's done, is a very discrete decision that really is before us now.
So we did have a lengthy conversation about that, and those funds have not been drawn down, so they've not been, they're held at the district. Yes, that's right. They were collected by the district, they're still there. We have to return to that conversation as to how much of that we want to allocate, if any, for
I just think that's something our board should be informed about. What is the decision reached?
It's $7 million plus the 174.
It's not reflected in our budget because it's not been transferred to the trust entity. The district still holds, it was the initial collection in January of this year that is still at the district level. What they sent was $1.5 million, if I recall, for our startup budget. And so the rest of that was retained by the district, and we have to determine if we want some of that to be, we did talk about earmarking some of it for the pilot, the 3 and 4 year, the 3-year-old pilot. But all of those dollars still are retained by the district.
And they won't reflect in this until we draw them down.
Until we make a decision about how we're going to spread them or spend them, but we need to make that decision.
Well, that sounds like a conversation that needs to get pursued by, in the conversations with CPS, right? Because presumably they would also be depending upon a portion of those funds for their own preschool expansion.
Well, for clarity's sake, would it be possible for us to receive that information? What, the 15 million annually that is allocated to expansion for community providers in this particular side of the program, it would be helpful, I think, from my perspective, and probably for the public, to be able to see and know what that number is, regardless of whether we have drawn it down or not.
But the upcoming October board meeting, I'd suggest that we have a report on this, just so that we know where it is. And then if additional conversations could occur in the, I'm trying to think of the name of the group.
About the partnership team?
Yeah, the partnership team, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to avoid calling it a wrong thing. So the partnership team should have some conversations about this subject as well, I think.
Can I just clarify Cheryl's question? So are you asking then, of the 15 million, what was actually collected? Because it's never 15 million, it's 14 point something.
Yes.
And then how much of that is still being reserved by surplus by the district
Yes,
versus?
almost as if it were its own separate account at the district. The district's not going to give us the money until it's drawn down, understandably, but it would be nice for transparency's sake to have that accounting because of our commitment to the public, that a portion would be used for public school expansion and a portion for preschool promise. And what does that look like? And I know that's still forming.
And what we need to have, I think, is work towards a very clear policy of what those funds are intended to be used for, and how it is they will be expended, and with what proper noticing and the like.
So I want to make sure I'm clear. To Hector's recommendation, we want to come back to this board with an amended recommendation about carryover funds, being more specific about how those funds are prioritized. And if I'm making sure I heard that correctly.
Yes, naming specifically those 3 buckets.
Okay.
And I guess I have an additional question that I don't recall discussing, and that is, if we know toward the end of the year, the projections, there's $1 million left over, but there's an idea about how to use that in the upcoming year, will that be included in the budget and approved as carryover money going to these items? I mean, will the board see that as part of a whole operating budget for the following year?
I think the way that I respond on the basis of the previous conversation, excuse me, would be that the potential expenditure of that $1 million for some great big idea would be a conversation within the Finance and Audit Committee. I would presume that they would bring that to us as their recommendation before simply on their own unilaterally pushing it into the budget for a particular purpose. I mean, that would be my take on it. Yes.
So what was brought up is important in the last 6 months. So as we talk about how we're going to spend it, our priority has to be how we're going to fund that last 6 months. And as you said, we got to have a policy for that. But we can't wait to the end, we got to have enough money. So we got to figure out how we're going to fund that. And then any excess money can be used for programming. So that's got to be our #1 priority, is fund the last 6 months of the 5th year.
And we had discussed using that purpose. There were a couple of different scenarios that were discussed back in June around how those funds could be used. And one of them was for those last 6 months.
So what do we need to do to make a commitment to that? I mean, how do we?
Yeah, we need to get that on the agenda of the partnership. Right.
Because I do believe when Jen presented, she had that pulled out, and that was that large reserve fund that was for that back end that wasn't yet covered.
Exactly so.
So
in a way, what we want to do is, I think, handcuff ourselves, as it were, explicitly to that particular purpose. Or at least have a conversation about it, such that it's clear on both sides that that's exactly what we're going to use that money for.
You said we're going about the 7 million?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I
That's
know.
what we got to get clear.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
well, I think when Jen, my understanding was when Jen presented that it was pretty clear that was to be reserved to help us shore up the back end that was not yet covered in anticipation of trying to get additional funds.
I'm not sure if
I thought, but.
I'm not sure if that was what Jen's recommendation or that's what was going to happen.
Okay.
And I think we need to move from a recommendation to that's what's going to
I
happen.
see.
That's the clarity that John is asking for,
Okay.
I think. We're all leaning in the same direction here,
Yeah.
it seems to me.
Yeah.
And so now we just want to make sure that we have the conversation and can kind of make
Got
it
it.
signed, sealed, and delivered. Good, thank you. You've gotten the feedback that you need to work on this proposal. Thank you very much. I'm sure there will be spirited conversation with you every time you bring forward a new policy, and don't we look forward to that. So thank you very much for your
I love conversation, so thank you.
Well, I like being explicit about this because the clearer we are and the more explicit about this, the easier it is for the public to follow where our priorities are, and that's what we always need to be answerable to. I think that moves us, if I can find my agenda, into, the cost and quality update. Tim Fogarty is here, Stephanie.
Right.
Presume you're
Yes,
gonna
I
help
will
us
just
out.
give a quick update. You have some materials in your packet on the screen. This committee has met a couple of times now, talking about spirited conversation. Those discussions are very in-depth and I think reflect our interest in making sure that our staff and the programs that are working with the Preschool Promise are able to be recruited and retained, and that wages are a big part of that. We have in front of you the roles and responsibilities of the committee, and I won't read each of those, but in general, it's how do we define the pay structure, the compensation that allows us to adhere to the master agreement, and I'll come back to that. And also identify how we prioritize those funds, how we find the funds, and then get feedback from our various constituent groups around how feasible what we're proposing is in an iterative process along the way, so that we're not creating something that's not sustainable or isn't able to be implemented. The structure and composition of the committee you see on the next slide. And, we have a number of people who are not board members who are on this committee because we wanted to make sure that we had input from an economist or an actuary or someone who was familiar with working with the kinds of calculations that we think are going to have to be made. We also wanted to make sure that we had providers at the table, so we had representation from multiple types of providers, multi-center, multi-site programs, single-site programs, as well as a family child care provider, because their pay structures are all specific to the type of programs that they are, and the CPP staff members. This group, again, has met several times. The most recent meeting was earlier this month, and the purpose of it was to look at a survey that was developed to begin to get data from the field on what the current salary structure is. I think the biggest unknown is the size of the issue. We have about 700 providers in the community. Right now, we have about 22 that are participating in quality improvement work, but for those that are in the tuition assistance work, about 40, we will be at some point expecting them to be able to pay the wage parity provision. But we've got lack of understanding as to where they are today, so we have to understand the landscape. What are the current pay structures for what staff in the preschool classroom, and how does that compare across programs? We suspect that some are already paying $15 an hour for some staff, but therein lies the issue, what staff? When you look at the master agreement language, it's not really applicable to the staff as the positions are defined in some of these community-based programs. And so one of the things that the committee agreed was that we need to get clarity from the board on how to interpret the master agreement as it relates to the use of a couple of terms. One is how we define instructors. The way the master agreement is worded, it says that we will pay $15 an hour for full-time instructors without 4-year degrees. And then it also uses the language where we will pay a competitive wage for full-time teachers with comparable credentials. And so those are kind of, squishy words that could be left to the interpretation of whoever is reading it. And we know from the conversations that we've had, even with partnership teams, that while the master agreement is instructive, it's not a perfect document. And so we have a number of areas like this that need to be clarified. But the committee did want to get clarification from the board on how to interpret those terms specifically. So I can pause. And
Does it want that clarification today? It's hard for me to know what's at stake here on either side, absent something that I could think about in advance. So it'd be helpful for me to hear from the cost of quality team and say, kind of, here's what's at stake and how it is that we decide this.
Mm-hmm. So I would just guide us back to intention in some of our early conversations when we were in the process of negotiating this. And my recollection is that that really was intended for a lead teacher position, CDA role, was what was intended for the cost of quality. That's, I don't know.
That was my understanding as well, because it's rather vague right now if you say instructor, because an instructor can be
anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
They can have a degree, they can have a CDA, they can have a high school diploma, depending on what position they're in. So my understanding was that that $15 was for that lead teacher that has that CDA or that 2 to 4 year degree.
I think it would probably also be helpful to get feedback from some community partners who have a very strong interest in this, to make sure that how we are interpreting it is how they would be interpreting it, and what they, sort of rally their constituency around, you know. So looks like they're going to say something.
I'm a part of that committee, and I believe that Stephanie did you get to talk to Julie Heath?
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Okay,
That's the next
I was
one.
gonna say,
Yep.
because she was going to help us to design a survey that we would send out to all the centers and hopefully get them back quickly. And to survey not only what they are paying at present, but what they would, I think part of it was, what is an instructor, kind of getting some information from the people who matter, because that's the people who are going to get the dollars. So that needs to go out, that needs get back sooner than later, so that we can get on to.
That's helpful.
And because the tuition assistance is not going, you're not going to start, or the centers are not going to start getting that payment until the end of October. So until they get that, they cannot afford to pay $15 an hour. Because that is part of what they're budgeting, and as far as the amount of children that they're enrolling is contingent upon that as well. So.
The other issue is we have to think about what providers are eligible. We have said the tuition assistance providers for sure, 3, 4, and 5-star rated programs. One of the challenges that we have with 2-star rated programs is that for them to get to a 3-star, they have to hire a higher level, higher credentialed staff member, and they often struggle to find the staff because they don't have the salaries in order to recruit and bring those staff on board. So we are also thinking that we may want to prioritize the 2+ providers who are close to being a 3 but can't get there because of salaries.
Stephanie, did the question come up about how many children, tuition assistance children, need to be in a classroom before there's an expectation?
Critical mass, yeah. We'll have to determine that based on the data that we receive. We know that 1 probably isn't enough. 5 may be better. Classroom full should just be a no-brainer, but we have to really understand what that looks like. And it may not be the same from one program to the next. What works in a single-site program will be very different from what works in a multi-site program and a family child care program, where it will be a real struggle because they don't have one preschool.
The number, and she definitely said the number of students that they have that are qualified, but then who are also participating in the program. So we don't have, as providers, they don't have a set amount that they can budget based on how many children in the seat because it's the last dollar in. And so you may only get $25 per student. And so there are a lot of things that we have to work through and really in order to get providers a real comfort level in how this is going to work and benefit their students.
The other thing, though, to Laura's point, we need someone who can really analyze the data and look at it in a variety of different stratifications so that we can ask questions, test it, and model some of this information based on the data that we get back, but also make sure that we're asking the right questions. Because the survey that was put together by people who do this every day, and it's a great survey, but we also want the comfort of knowing that it's the right survey. And so Tim and I were charged with either talking to Julie Heath or even the CBC to identify possible sources for that kind of analysis work, data collection and analysis work, and we'll have to determine how we pay for it or not. So more to come on that, but quickly, because we do want to get the data back by December so that we can make some recommendations at the beginning of the year and be ready to go.
Yeah, my question is just what is the urgency of this, of obtaining this information so that we can move forward? So you're saying that the survey results want to come back before December?
Well,
what's the timeline?
Well, and we talked about this a little bit in the meeting. It was really based on what it would take to get the survey finalized and in the field and back for analysis. And we thought that it would take us every bit of between now and the end of December to make that happen. Because we want to give providers ample time. One thing we know is that a low return rate will not give us what we need. And so there will have to be some specific follow-up with providers and some coaxing and, probably some explanation. Because it's pretty sensitive data. The state has tried to do surveys, salary surveys for years, and they never get more than a 10% response rate. So you make decisions on inadequate data. So we just want to make sure that we have adequate time to follow up, get a good sample, and then get the analysis done. The urgency is that the master agreement assumes, without saying, that we're doing the $50 an hour now. It's one of the things we talked about in partnership teams. Like, there are issues with the master agreement and interpretation of it on a number of different fronts, and this is one of those. So the sooner we get the data, the better we're going to be able, the sooner we're going to be able to make recommendations and be able to implement. Well, yes.
Based on Cheryl's comment, and Terry England seconded it, I think we have a sense as to what our sense of the use of the words instructor should mean here. And so that, in a way, what I suggest is kind of build a model around that assumption and see what happens as you go forward. Does that make sense?
Yes, to me.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Say it one more time.
Are community providers on the, more than one community provider on the team?
One of each type. And we'll be going out to more of it.
But then those are gonna go out in mass, and I would hope that, I love your comment that even the state's trying to do this, and we've got that if we tell the providers when they get this in their letter, that, this has happened before, and, you don't like the policies that happen by the state, maybe if you return, we'll get more accurate data. I mean, I just think that seems good, reasonable to tell somebody that if you want to be heard, you need to respond.
Well, it's also something I think the community engagement apparatus that we have here can help us promote as well, that because this will help us serve them and help them serve kids and all of that.
So family child care providers who are self-employed, small businesses, there's no wages. Well, unless they're type A's, I mean, you're talking about type A. The larger, that have an employee.
Right.
Not
Some of them do have employees.
the type A's have employees,
Yeah.
but not the 6 or fewer children.
We don't actually, yes, we do. Yes. So can I just repeat the definition of the instructor? You have a question, Terry, I can tell from your.
I guess I'm trying to figure out who you're going to. I'm not on that, but I just wanted to make sure that every demographic is being addressed, not just the quality deserts. And the information that you're seeking I think is already available through 4C.
Salary data?
It's old, we were told.
It's old? Okay.
That's why. It's quality improvement, we decided to do it.
Which question are you asking?
About the surveys that are sent out to the providers about how much they charge and what they pay their employees.
We don't have anything on salary. We've got what tuition.
Just the tuition.
The tuition.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So, just to answer that, we will be doing a sample, but based on all 700 providers that are in the Cincinnati Public School District boundaries. And we'll ask, that's why having someone who does this, tell us what an adequate sample is for the different types of providers and demographic groups is going to be so important. And then we'll have to pursue it to make sure that we meet that, whatever that sample size is for each group.
Those surveys also being circulated inside of CPS.
Community.
We just want
So we give a
CPS salaries are public and
I can throw the CBA at you.
So I'll follow up with you, Terry, and Cheryl, on the instructor definition.
I want to move on to the enrollment update. We've been meeting for not quite, an hour and 15, 20 minutes or so, we finally get to the point. Although the mission moment, that was the point too. So Vanessa, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we were very excited today. We had a staff rally to really celebrate the work and the excitement that we have had over the last several weeks. And we started that excitement with a meaning classes in session, which takes us to our enrollment, which we're very excited about. If you remember, when we were here last, we had 36 children that were enrolled, and there was some grave concern, and a lot of it had to do with kind of where we were in the process, how long we had been enrolling. We had opened up our data enrollment system on July 7th. We were still working to get the word out. And if you look at our current enrollment, even though it says 257, at the end of the day, we were at 262 children enrolled in the preschool class. So it speaks to the mission that we talked about in terms of that parent who was one of those folks who were able to be enrolled. So the breakdown of those numbers, you will see 74 of them are 3-year-olds, which was a decision, a critical decision that this board made, and it paid off in telling us that there were families out there who would benefit from those resources. Before we opened up to 3-year-olds at that point, we had around 122 4-year-olds. So since then, we have enrolled roughly 125 children in the last several days. And again, it has been about teamwork, partnership, our people on the ground, making sure that we were supporting our families and getting the right documentation that verified what needed to be verified according to our policies in place, so that we can get their application through, so that the resources that they needed to continue would be provided. The other work has been around, did anybody have any, need to look at that slide? Yes, you want to point something
I
out?
also want to acknowledge that we have 831 children in total.
In total, yes.
With tuition assistance reflecting our outreach growth.
Yes.
Before you read the slide, I'm trying to put this in some perspective. So I'm not sure what 831 really means, or 257. What was the potential pool of kids that we should be enrolling or eligible, so I can get a sense how successful that is?
Um,
What was our goal?
Our goal was, we set goals, we projected goals based on what the landscape was. When we started out looking at the landscape, which was almost 4 years ago, if you look at the RAND study. So we set, I think our goal was 2,000 total, 20 new children, and 1,000. I think our goal, 2,000 total, but 1,000 in each space. Cincinnati Public Schools and Preschool Promise.
2,000.
And the community providers.
In the first year, or even in the first year?
Total.
The first year or ongoing?
Ongoing. 200
The number always in my mind is 6,000 children.
impacted.
After 5 years.
After
In 5 years.
Being touched by quality improvement, and that's the number that stuck in my head.
So can someone enroll their child November the 17th?
Yes.
Then so if we're going to do an evaluation, how do we evaluate a kid that started in August, and then you got kids in the same classroom in November? How are we going to have a real accurate evaluation?
Just, you get to do it. I mean, it's no different than in like if I was a 3rd grade teacher. I would, if I have to evaluate them, and that my evaluation has to be in by October 32nd or 1st. Good thing I'm not. So I have to evaluate them, no matter if they've only been in my class for 3 days or since August. So.
I don't know how we, okay, I just don't.
Right, but there's different evaluation times.
Okay.
So,
their benchmarks based on their ages. And so after a child is coming into that classroom, well, before they're coming into the classroom, you do an evaluation, and after they're in the classroom 60 days, then you do another evaluation to see where they are.
And when you say evaluate, you're meaning because we're about to bring an evaluator on, how are we gonna look at this?
Really good impact.
Yeah.
The kid that's there in August is gonna have a 3-year-old, who's gonna have a greater impact upon that child than someone who comes in November. When we do our overall evaluation of our impact, I'm just saying, we're not comparing apples to apples.
But what was the counter dosage? You know, how long was the child in the program? How long was their experience? And how does that affect, how do you evaluate that in context of their kindergarten readiness?
What is our expected turnover rate? People dropping out. Cincinnati Public Schools is about 30-35%. So turnover.
So what you are asking are questions that will be in the scope of work for our evaluators. And one of the things they want to come in and do is a deep dive in where we are and looking at, I mean, and this is why we are hiring experts who are able to put the controls in and how you look at a child who's 9 months old. And because they're enrolled in the preschool promise, does not, just if they weren't enrolled in the preschool promise didn't necessarily mean that they were not enrolled in a preschool. And so all of that will be taken into consideration as well.
I have an additional follow-up question, kind of along the lines of Odell's. So if we think of these students as part of a pool who would be eligible for preschool within the district boundaries, do we have a sense as to what kind of take-up rate we're expecting in year 1 based upon, say, Denver's experience? And what a reasonable goal might be for enrollment?
I think the longer, I think there was this conversation, we've had so many conversations, but the statement that we don't know what we don't know, and so to try to benchmark against Denver is different than benchmarking against what's happening here on the ground. So even in a discussion this week, we had a conversation about, do we need to go back? Because that original brand study was based on demographic, since city growth, population growth. We haven't looked at the growth of population. Since then, we did our numbers and our projections, and so how do we look at where we are today, kind of recalculate the landscape, and the one thing that we discussed in our partnership team was we're looking at these numbers from over time in terms of monitoring those numbers. What we plan to do was look at them again. So we're looking at them, we looked at them August 15th, we made some course corrections in terms of how we were talking to parents. Instead of denial, we switched to pending. You know, so some of the things we're doing in-house to make sure we then up our engagement instead of, you know, we went from calling providers to going to providers and one-to-one, and so made a bunch of adjustments. We're gonna look at our enrollment again. We looked at it September 15th, we're gonna look at October 15th, and then we're gonna make some decisions about whether we've done enough to get the word out. Are there families, you know, under rocks who are not hearing about this, that we need to kind of do some different strategies? So I think you know, before when we first started, we were just focused on awareness. And now we're focused on, you know, with a staff in place, you'll hear from Mary in a minute, how do we make sure that our marketing and our community engagement is targeted and more targeted, better targeted and more strategic in terms of the way we're spending dollars. And so we moved from general awareness to, you know, targeted community engagement.
Vanessa, do we know how many children that were enrolled or were already enrolled in a center program, and so, as opposed to new children who found out about the program?
We're working on that too. We're looking at, so the other thing that we did, we have an enrollment system. So what we just, every week we are looking at the data that's coming out, and it probably would be good for you all to actually see one of our weekly data reports, and probably where we started and then now what we're looking at. It probably would be beneficial for you all to see those, because we're measuring different things. We're measuring demographics. We're looking at what provider types the children are enrolling in. And this is what I mean about strategic. So we are seeing most of them enroll in the multi-sites and not as many enrolled in single sites or family childcare. Then that tells us something about where we're putting the direction out. So we don't know that. We're looking at it and we're building on what we're collecting. And I think we'll have a more significant report probably for the next meeting because we started to really hone in. You'll see one example of that when Mary comes to present of kind of an example of how we're starting to look at the data.
John?
Yeah, I'd just make a couple of comments, suggestions. One, the recent progress is good. And it's encouraging to just start up to see this, and I think it'll be very much what Denver saw. Second, I would be sure we continue to anchor around our original goals. We might have to we might have to change them. Maybe we would conclude in life experience, that they need to be modified, but I would not lose sight of our original goals that we undertook. Partly because we know we'll need more money eventually to get to them. The other I would say is how much tuition assistance should we be able to provide with $15 million a year? But as you recognize, there will be a certain amount for quality improvement, something else, but what is the number we should be able to get to and afford if we do it efficiently? What is that number? I know what that is. Because that's what we know we should be able to do within our current budget. And I'd have that as a target. We made a promise to the community here that we know promises aren't always kept exactly as made, but we should keep that anchor. That's how we sold this levy. I don't know how strong you believe in it.
Yeah, strongly. I would also point out that right now, this enrollment is based on prioritization up to 200% of the poverty level.
And that can be expanded to 300.
Yeah, and that's another decision. So our other enrollment was based, so that
we should be able to afford, I don't know what it is, 2,000, 1,500, 2,500. What's the number we can afford with it that we would be pointing to?
Yeah, and the other thing that we're looking at now is what, based on the total dollar investment in that number of children, so on the community provided basis providers is what's the average dollar spent on per child, and so how do we then look at those things? And then the other thing we're grappling with is we require some of the, we're in the partnership team, we're grappling with some of the, could be not maybe inequities, but we're doing last dollar in, so we have to wait for a family to get a denial letter from the county, which could be a 2 to 3 month process before we even look at their application. So we also have families who have enrolled or tried to enroll, but we have said you have to go and apply first for PFCC or OD. So we're also kind of want to come back with barriers as well as we continue to go through this process. Is what are the barriers that that families are experiencing to try to access these resources as well.
You've hit on a huge one that's of a lot of concern to me about barriers to enroll in community programs that are not barriers to enroll in CPS programs.
Exactly.
That's a huge one.
Vanessa, I want to thank you very much for bringing us good news.
That's
And
good
there's
news. We got more good news.
I know, and so, or you have,
So also on the provider, tuition assistance providers, we have 41 when we came in September. We had 12 community-based providers approved, and we're now at 39 community-based providers, which also has an impact on being able to enroll children. As we increase the number of providers, and we're increasing the number of families who have access to tuition assistance. So we also were at 0 quality improvement providers, and now we're at 22 and 5 of them have been approved. We have 7 who are waiting to be approved, and then we have 10 pending applications. So we are definitely doing the work on the ground with the team that we have in place to have movement. And we have, in those approved sites, we have single sites, multi-sites, and we're excited that, and I know we, in our engagement, I even see one of our family providers, that we are making sure that we're getting out and talking to folks so they understand how it is that they can engage in this program, because there's been a lot of misunderstanding, and we're working to clear a lot of that up as well. So it's paying off in terms of access to the resources.
I don't have any questions about that, except I would love to see the community providers in 2 numbers, family child care providers and centers. But that's for another piece of information. But I'm wondering if while I was seeing that
List, is that what you're saying? You want to see the list?
No, just the number, maybe the 39 should be broken into 2 numbers, or the 22 should be broken into 2 numbers, centers and family child care providers.
Okay.
Just for our information. The other thing that I was going to ask is, while we're talking about quality improvement, I just wonder if we could move the agenda around and keep going on that topic and then come back to some of the other topics.
Vanessa, you're up.
Mayor?
Just continue talking about the quality improvement initiatives, and we'll circle back to the marketing in a moment.
So we'll just move to the slides just to kind of give an update. So these should look vaguely familiar to you. When there was an assignment to understand, we had a large process map. And so I'm going to go through the 2 process maps that we developed to kind of show here's where we are in the process, which is getting us to get these providers in place. There's been some adjustments in terms of as we go and we work and we talk to providers. Originally, we were going to start with assessments, but we are finding that we need to get their applications in, and so they're doing the initial application, and then they get a visit from Patty, and to determine kind of where they are in the process. We did not want them to go through an assessment when they may have already had a step up to quality assessment, because one of the things that we've been hearing is that some of the structure that was put in place in that initial time with were kind of some things that were already happening that step up to quality, or that they were doing on their own, or had already been done. So we want to use the work that they have and move it forward in that way. And so we bring those applications back to the QI Council. We review them and say they're ready to go forth with a coach, and in partnership, then that step becomes in partnership with the provider and the coach. They review and they do this assessment, look at the tools, and then put together, build on the continuous improvement or quality plan that they have in place. And then it comes back, that plan comes back in place to then have the funding assigned to that plan so they can be implemented. And so they work with their coach to do that. So that's pretty steady.
So a question in that process, have there been any circumstances where somebody has applied and it's gone to the point of the QI Council and you've denied it?
Yes, there are three such denials.
For what kinds of reasons?
We have one program that was not licensed, so it was an unlicensed program. We referred them to ODJFS. We had a program on a provisional license, so they went from a type B provider to a center, and so they're on hold right now getting compliances in order from their visit. So basically their site visits from licensing have to be in order before they can be approved for any kind of QI support.
And they know that, so it hasn't been for, reasons that they can't, it's just they need to come back when they cleared up those things.
Are there numbers included in this, in the 81?
If you go, no, if you go back, if you were to go back to the slide, they were in the non-approvals.
Patty, you said there were 3,
Yes.
and you referenced 2. Or did I miss it?
No, two have sort of the same issue with non-compliance as currently. And again, it changes, somebody had a step-up visit yesterday, so it's a day-to-day process in terms of where they're at. What we're trying to do is not assume they don't have the time or resources to get to that 3-star rating in our time frame. We're trying to put them in and in that first quarter really assess. It's not something you can do at the first site visit. So we're trying not to really deny anyone, but they do have to meet basic licensing criteria and sort of a readiness to partner.
Right.
So we go to the next slide, and then we'll come back and talk about the coaching collaborative. And so, so then they come to the QI council, and we match they will be matched with a coach, and then they'll meet with their coach and start to, develop or strengthen their work plan, and then they continue that work, and the action plan is completed. They apply to step up to quality, and then we move them on to the TA category, which is our goal.
Okay, Vanessa, I see that you have the classroom partner coach. We're not coaching the director?
We are. So now let's come back to the slide. So we sent out an update to you all, and if you recall, it was Deborah Alsop, Kimya, Dr. Moyo, Dr. Moyo. Am I saying it right tonight? Okay. And Patty Gleason, and then Sally looked over them but did not participate in the selection process. And so in talking through, we were originally thinking about kind of only having a business assistance coach, but we're going to allow that process to be dynamic in terms of whether that partner coach will do, so that probably needs to be a correction, will help on the direct, we have a business assistance coach assigned, and so it could be 2 coaches, one doing business assistance and classroom coaching at the same time. It could be one doing it all. It could be whatever that provider is needed. The feedback that we were hearing from providers is that they really need to have a voice in that process in terms of that selection and how that bears out. I should also note that we have someone at the table who is, that's her specialty area. One of the coaches will be, have that business assistance as her coaching specialty, but it might be someone else. And so we just want to make sure that we work with that provider, because one of the things that we heard as we started listening was sometimes the coach, there's confusion about having a lot of people in there and not really being able to manage, working on one thing at a time. So it could be one in at one point, one in another. We just want to be very sensitive to the provider being able to have a voice in their continuous improvement plan.
I think in the interest of time, Vanessa, we're going to need to skip the next slide. We're about 25 minutes behind.
So just to say that the coaching collaborative is, we're working on solidifying those contracts as well.
Thank you. Mary, you've got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
While she's coming up, Mary is the new manager for marketing and community engagement. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Yes, it is my first.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And I wanted to thank all of our community members for coming too. This is a really awesome turnout. So you're setting the bar very high for my future but it's nice to see all of you here. I've been in my current position for 3 weeks, and it's been a very busy 3 weeks. I tried to pull together some updates from the time from before I was here as well from the team. So these slides reflect that and reflect all the work that our small but mighty team has been doing over the last couple months. So I don't know, do you want me to read through them? Do you just want to ask questions?
Highlights.
Yeah, okay.
Highlights.
Okay. Some highlights so far. We sent out the HCJFS letter to the providers, which basically just cleared some confusion about dollars, public dollars, and preschool promise dollars and how those work together. And that went out in the mail last week, and since then we've already had 3 quality improvement applications so far. So I think that was a really successful partnership with HCJFS. Flo has worked one-on-one with parents to help complete applications, and she met with over 50 parents in the last month. And as you saw reflected in the enrollment numbers, I think that's really paying off. And we have some really exciting partnership opportunities, which we are working through to solidify some dates with the Museum Center, the Public Library, Santa Maria Community Services, the Y, and United Way. So those are really great. Any questions on that? Okay. Marketing highlights. We sent out the press release for the 3-year-old decision and got some really good pickup on that. Not included on this list because I got my media report today is WSTR, WCPO, and WKRC. So we definitely got some good attention for that. We have signage for providers, which has gone out. These really nice big signs that they're going to be hanging out. I know Terry can speak to that. We talked about that this morning. We also have a one-pager completed, which is in your board packet, which really just is a high-level overview of what the Preschool Promise is. We're hoping that that will be a good leave behind for partner organizations and community members. And then we've been working on some web updates. And in the interest of time, I won't show you the provider map, even though it's pretty cool. But we have an interactive provider map now on the approved provider page. And it includes public and community-based providers. And you can go in and kind of click through and see different information about those providers. And you can filter. And this will give us a really good opportunity in the future to perhaps do an enrollment overlay on top of that to see where our students are and what gaps we have. So that's really exciting.
That's an issue that the board has a lot of engagement around.
Yeah, okay, good. So for upcoming work, you can all read through this, but we are working on some data, so we'll be able to report to you kind of what our web analytics look like and our social media analytics, so that we can really be seeing, you know, who's clicking through to the website, where are they going, how can we influence that a little bit more, that interaction online. We're creating toolkits for parents and providers to help them through the enrollment process. We are updating our community engagement and marketing plan. I believe the previous one was for the first 3 months, and so that runs out at the end of September, so we're looking at extending that. And then I'm looking forward to working with some of you on the community engagement committee. Any questions?
Sorry, Mary, to have to.
That's okay. Thank
you very much. We'll move you up in the agenda the next time. That brings us to the interim executive director's update. So I'm going to ask you to speed. No.
Okay. Speed. Progress today. Well, we have a fully staffed team, which is just very exciting. You met them all at this point. Moved to new offices last 2 weeks ago. As a result of that move, we have new email addresses and new phone numbers. So the staff roster is in the materials. If you need to contact us, use that information. If you use our old email addresses, they will be forwarded for the next 30 days to our new email addresses, but after that, it will just give you the new email address. So sometimes drop down gives you the most recent, sometimes it doesn't. So just make sure you're looking at the Cincy-promise.org email address. Mine is still going back and forth as I kind of work through this interim role. But, for the most part, the email addresses have changed. And visit us on the second floor. We're in the new digs, and it's a really nice space, although it's very cold in the offices, so bring a sweater. more significantly, Vanessa and I went through over the weekend the chronology of the activity today. Just kind of, it was really therapeutic. So much has happened, and I would love to update that and share it with you all kind of as a read between meetings, because we wouldn't be able to do it if more than you all being willing to meet. And we have had more meetings than the law should allow since the board was put in place. And so I think you all need a pat on the back for the amount of help that you've given us.
But I really want to thank Vanessa. Vanessa, you have carried a tremendous load, especially Vanessa and she's gone.
That's right.
Oh, she's good. I want to thank her for the load she's been carrying and you. So it's been a pleasure. I'm so glad now you're fully staffed.
Thank you. So with regards to the partnership team update, the team has met a couple of times and is scheduling a third meeting. And there's a lot of good conversations, and you know this because we sent out updates in between meetings. The expansion to 3-year-olds with tuition assistance at 200% was a big decision coming out of that group. And we'll look in October at how we're doing, and if we have the ability to bring on more 4-year-olds between 201 up to 300, we'll make that decision, or at least decide to wait and decide later. But we really want to look at where we are with enrollment at that point in time before we decide to expand to that income. We also talked about special education. That's an ongoing conversation. We talked about it twice. More recently decided that a revised budget that came from Jim Wagner that accounts for a diagnostic team and one Eisner teacher was approved at $580,000,
And the one speech language
and speech
teacher.
language, yes, so it's about $520,000. I think that number was included in the update for those staff. We also recommended that a part-time person be hired devoted to community providers and helping them understand how to access the system, how to complete the paperwork, and make sure that their children are getting through the process. And so where that person sits is still the subject of discussion, whether it's at CPS or at CPP, but definitely certainly focused at community providers and getting them educated. And then the third issue that we talked about is the cost of quality, how we're going to implement that. We've not obviously arrived at a conclusion because of the committee's work, but recognize that the master agreement for a number of reasons will have to be revised for that. Special ed says that special ed dollars will be devoted on community-based children only, and that is not how it's being interpreted. So we just need to come up with a point in time where we decide we're going to revise the master agreement to reflect our actual practice. And then the group is, it's very active conversations. The group has said we need to have a joint meeting of the boards so that we can show the collaboration. It will obviously have to be a public meeting. The date for when we might do that has to be decided, but sooner rather than later because of the amount of progress that's been made. And we need to celebrate that this is working and make sure that the boards have the opportunity to be together in that regard. That's the partnership update. The other thing that I had that I wanted to go through real quickly is the evaluation partner. You know, we have been down this road since May. We've had 2 RFP processes for evaluators. First round, where the price tags were outrageous, and so we went back out and rebid it. Got responses from basically the same respondents from the first round. Thank you to Laura and Dr. Owens and also to John for their help in going through those proposals and helping us think through what the right questions were. Then the team interviewed 3 of the providers. That included APA, who did the evaluation work for Denver, Crane, which is the Crane Center for Early Childhood Research and Policy at OSU, and then the third was the University of Cincinnati. And through those interviews and looking at their specific proposals, we are making a recommendation that we work with the Crane Center at OSU to be our evaluation partner. There were a number of features of their work that stood out. One, they will be doing child-level outcomes assessments that don't rely solely on the state's assessment, whether it's the ELA or the KRA. They'll be doing the Woodcock-Johnson for a sample of children that's really more consistent with what we've been doing locally, and we'll have more child-level data. Their costs were a little bit higher than APA, but we did renegotiate that with them, and they pulled out some of their costs. So they're coming in at about $310,000 per year. and they have said that they don't anticipate that those charges will go up. That was a question that the board members had about that. The one thing that stood out too was that there was a lack of diversity in their partnership. And so we did ask them to consider partnering with a local provider to do some of the work that we know needs to be done, namely qualitative research. They had some of that in their proposal, but not significant dollars attached to that. So they have been in conversation with Crystal Kendrick and the Voice of Your Customer, and we'll be working with them and have added Crystal's work to their scope of work. That may adjust the budget upwards slightly, but
So the budget will go up?
yes, and we're waiting to see what that budget is. It'll probably go up some, but we try to give them some parameters.
Because if you look at the other proposals, she was included two others, and I think her amount of her work was around 25,000.
Varied. One of them was, and one of them was like 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 20.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I wouldn't want them to say to us, yes, we got this diversity, and they're paying her 5,000.
Absolutely.
That would
Yeah, we
be
did talk about that.
tokenism
That's right.
that I wouldn't accept. Right? So I think it's got to be
Substantial.
substantial.
Yeah.
So if we're going to vote, to me, my vote would be provisional based on that. I can't, if we're going to vote.
So the executive committee did, but I don't know if you want them to ratify that or.
The executive committee's already done.
Oh, okay.
But we did.
And we had that kind of conversation actually in the executive committee.
And so we have.
One quick question is, since you've done that, so what is the dollar amount that the executive committee can vote on before some a dollar amount has to come before the board, the full board? What is your authority in terms of dollar amount?
I can't tell you.
The authority of the executive committee was really to act in the absence of the board.
Right.
But not, that would.
Right.
Right, but I'm saying still, when you act the board, you have a dollar amount, and normally there's a dollar amount you can do without it coming
That
for the
is
full board.
one of the policies we have said that the finance and audit committee needs to develop.
And so the contract will come back to the executive committee before we finalize, signatures and price, but we'll hold them to what was in the
Hold them to that
proposal.
whole thing.
Well, how about this, that before the committee comes back to the executive committee, it goes to the working group for your further kind of analysis.
No, we said yes to it with that provision.
Oh, okay,
I just want to
fine.
be sure that
Okay,
provision's
fine,
there,
fine.
and that it's substantial, not a token. That's my only concern.
Yeah, when we told
And they cut
them,
out the office fee.
we actually told them no more than 20,000, based on going back to the proposal. They took 12,000 out of the proposal
Right.
because they had quoted a local office and.
We said
there's no need for
pay for the
that.
office,
So they
right.
took 12,000 out, we said you can go up to 20 to include.
Another 20?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So we're excited, we have to negotiate a contract with them, we're looking at a scope of work, and hopefully we'll have them on board in early October to get going. You can see who the team consists of. Really solid team, well respected in the state, and a good background working with school districts, and a lot of work in literacy. The only other, if there are no other questions on the evaluation, the only other thing I'll call your attention to, there is a document in materials called Setup for Quality. One of you have it, I think Dr. Owens asked this question early on, does Setup for Quality really measure quality at a point of differentiation? And the state conducted a independent assessment of the validity of Setup for Quality and confirmed that it does work. Really, any rated program makes a difference. But a 3, 4, and a 5-star program makes a measurable difference towards quality and towards kindergarten readiness. So I wanted you all to have a copy of that document.
Good. Any questions for Stephanie before we go into executive session? So recall that the procedure for going into executive sessions, we need a motion and an approval for that. And then what we need to do is actually a roll call vote to get us there. And then we have to state the purpose of it, which is, in this case, to discuss the search for an executive director. And then we have to vote to go back out of it again, and then vote to adjourn the regular meeting. So we have several votes.
Chair, I move that we go into executive session.
I second.
for the purpose of?
Or to talking about the executive director search.
Great, thank you. Cheryl, you have to vote.
Oh.
It's a roll call,
Okay.
roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye. Terry?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
Kenya?
Aye.
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 Good, thank you. So we're going to executive session now, so I'd ask everybody, please, who hasn't just voted, to please leave the room except for Weiss. Simple.
Yes, and